Well, we spend a fair amount of time on this show talking about current political issues and what's happening now. And every now and then I like to put my ear to the railroad tracks and try to get a sense of what's coming down the line. I'd mentioned, I don't know, 7, 8 months ago that the fat acceptance movement was going to be the next thing after the transgender movement that was going to be our newest lesson that must be beaten into our heads. And now I'm starting to see more and more signs of something that is along these same woke lines and driven by the same woke things, but in my mind, much more disturbing. I'm Bill Little, by the way, here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this show is Right Angle, made possible by the members at BillLittle.com. Gentlemen, I'm seeing more and more reports and cases of a psychological condition, which is called body integrity identity disorder, but basically the term that's being applied to it is Transablism. And I'm not making this up. These are people who are intentionally, permanently disabling themselves for reasons that are hard to fathom. People who are having perfectly good legs amputated so that they can go around in wheelchairs. There's an example on Instapundit that got me thinking about this, about a woman who felt like she should have been born blind. So she blinded herself by pouring drain cleaner into her eyes. And most shocking of all is that she did this under the encouragement and essentially under the supervision of her psychologist, who I think was the person who drove her to the hospital. Put aside the little things that are morally repugnant about this, namely, there are eye banks for people who actually would like to see. And if you are so determined to lose your vision, you could think about maybe just donating your eyes. Put that away. And put away the fact that psychological professionals are not only trying to talk you out of this, but are in fact helping you to do it. The idea of permanently maiming yourself and cutting off your legs or your arms because you want the victimhood status, you want something to put you on the virtue wagon is horrific. And my conclusion on this was, so cutting off arms and legs or blinding yourself in order to get to be a victim is not only repugnant but makes the skin crawl. It's essentially no different than what they're arguing for the transgender movement. They're just different parts that they're cutting off. Scott, I saw you flinch on this one. I flinched on this one too. Put the politics aside, the practicality of it aside, the sickness of a society aside. There is something evil about this. There's something evil about taking a healthy body and maiming it in order to get attention or victimhood status. It just makes your skin crawl.
What I don't understand is why any actual maiming is required. Can't I just identify as blind or lame? Isn't that possible? Because I've heard we can do that with other things in life.
Yeah, sure.
It's funny, when you said this, the first thing I thought of is when I was a little boy, I would occasionally close my eyes and walk around the house with my eyes closed and to see how I would be if I could not see. And
I did that too.
I had a cousin who I still have, is a cousin who's still alive, and she is blind. And I think this probably happened after I met her. And I remember one day she came to visit, and we were out back, and somebody asked, where she was, and she was down in the woods. And then in a little bit, she emerged from the woods, and she was walking up toward the house, and periodically she would clap her hands. And we're like, what is she doing? And she was echolocating off the house. We live kind of out in the woods, so there's not a lot of houses around. And so she knew that she could hear the reverb from the house, and she knew where she was going. Anyway, that fascinated me, and I admired her. And I thought, you never know what's going to happen in life. Someday I may wind up being blind. So I literally thought as a little boy, immature thinking was like, I'm preparing in case that happens to me.
smart.
Like, how could I survive that? I've often wondered when I see people in wheelchairs muscling around with their powerful biceps. I was like, could I do that? Wow. That takes not only tremendous physical upper body strength, but just tremendous force of will and character. That said, I don't want to hasten that day for me or anybody else. And if I had said to anybody in my family, hey, I'm pretty sure that I could navigate as a blind person, and so I'm kind of going to take it to the next level. I was wondering if you could drive me to the hospital after I do this to my eye sockets. That would have been the cue to take me to a mental health professional.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and then the mental health professional encourages you and helps you pour the bleach, and then she drives you to the hospital.
No, that's not what I'm thinking at all.
But that's what happened in this case. That's what happened in this case.
But that would have been an indicator that something is really wrong with Scott, and that we need to deal with that, not by encouraging the distortion of reality that he's going through, but by helping him to address it and to see it for what it is, so that he doesn't go down that path. If you really want to identify with people who are blind, then get involved in a charity that helps people who are blind, or come alongside of a friend who needs some assistance, or just make friends with somebody who has a handicap, and just be a friend to that person without in essence not being charitable, but just being a friend. So you can do all that kind of stuff. But you're right. There's a lot of parallels here with the whole transgenderism movement, and it's not hatred, it's not discrimination, it's not phobia to say that something is awry there, something's wrong, and that there are better ways to deal with it than to encourage the divergent thinking, so-called, the aberrant thinking, and in some cases abhorrent, like in this case, abhorrent thinking, and to take that person and say, well, who am I to say that it's wrong for you to gouge your eyes out? Let's see if we can be of some assistance here. I hope that this is another one of those instances where the internet grabs a hold of something that two people are doing somewhere in the world and makes it seem like it's a big dang deal, when really it's a super small percentage of the population, and it's not a growing wave. But it's sad, and there is help for people who need the help, but we need more friends. We need more sensible people to come around them.
Yeah, Steve Scott said if he had a sudden desire to pour a drain cleaner in his eyes, there's something wrong with Scott, and he's right. And if you have a psychological a therapist, a person who's licensed to give psychological advice, and that person, instead of trying to talk you out of it, helps you along with it, then there's something wrong with that person too. Yeah. If you were to say if I were to say that I've given this a great deal of thought, and I want both of my legs amputated at the knees, and this is what some of these people are calling for. It's still a very fringe group, but it's getting bigger. I'm concerned it's the very front edge of a bell curve, like everything else.
A social contagion, like we've seen with the transgender movement.
Driven by the same things. But here's my question for you: if I went to a doctor and said, "This is my will. This is what I want to do, and I'm determined to do this," what kind of doctor would perform that operation? What? I'm sure you could find them, because we can find them now. But if you were to actually confront a doctor and say, I want you to amputate both of my perfectly healthy legs at the knees, because I feel like it, who's going to perform that surgery?
Somebody.
And if that's the case, if that's so obviously repugnant, then why are we not applying that same standard to lopping up other parts of people, which is what's going on right now?
The person who would do that, the doctor who would do that, is somebody worse than Dr. Frankenstein. Frankenstein was at least trying to create new life with old parts, old dead parts. The idea of taking life, a healthy leg, a healthy arm, healthy eyeballs, and turning them into dead tissue. What is that? Murder by degree? I need to think that one through, but that's what comes to me. And yeah, there's a real fear of social contagion here. Thank God, gender dysphoria is one of the worst mental conditions that I know of. The rate of either attempted suicide or suicide ideation is 40% or higher. among people who suffer from this condition, and that number is unchanged whether or not they undergo transitioning. So what we're doing is not helping. We need to provide actual honest help for the victims of this condition, and not indulge in hormones and surgeries and butchery on prepubescent or pubescent girls. That said, I want to get back to the original topic on this just a little bit more. Macular degeneration runs in my family. My grandfather had it. His aunt had it, and he had there are two kinds of macular degeneration: wet and dry. The dry kind is what kind? I can't remember which is which. Darn it! But in the one kind, your vision, your macula starts dying from the outside in. Your vision just over the years gets more and more tunnel vision until finally it's lights out. The other kind starts in the center and works its way out. The advantage, if you want to call it that, of the second one is that it doesn't destroy the entire macula. You keep your peripheral vision. And that's the version my grandfather had. And he got it fairly young. Well, he was about my age. I think he was in his early 50s when it hit him. It usually comes quite a bit later in life. And over about the next 20 years, he lost virtually all of his vision until all he had left was his peripheral vision. And when you start a conversation with him, you would watch him dart his eyes back and forth a little bit until he had you fixed so that he could seem to look at you. It was kind of his echolocation, using what little vision he had to get you centered in where his eyes were directed so that he wouldn't be off-putting to you. And since it is a genetic thing, it's something that I've got hovering over me. I go to the eye doctor every year. I take my Biot and all the other good vitamins for my eyes, and so far, knock on wood, no macular degeneration or any sign of macular degeneration in me. But this idea... Give me a moment. The idea, not of losing my vision, which is bad enough, but of losing the vision of my beautiful wife and handsome sons. And to read that somebody did that to themselves on purpose. Bill, I read that headline. I couldn't even read the story. I got a ball of ice in my stomach reading that. And then on reflection, the idea that other people are helping people to do these things to themselves instead of getting them the psychological, the help that they need. This is the end game for this identity movement, that you are what you imagine you want to be, or that your mood swings tell you are, of people mutilating themselves to feel like they think they should feel. It doesn't work. It does not work. We've seen it with the transgender movement. We're seeing it now with people hurting, maiming themselves. It doesn't work. And if there's anything that any viewer takes away from this, who might be thinking about harming themselves in some way, it doesn't work. Seek help, not hurt.
The first words of the Hippocratic Oath, which are thousands of years old, are first, do no harm. That's when you become a medical professional, a doctor, you take this oath because for millennia, this has been the ethical guidestone, ethical guidelines that people who treat people adhere to. The Hippocratic Oath is essentially, it's the essence of medicine. And among the things in the Hippocratic Oath is first, do no harm. How a doctor could perform any of these surgeries and remove healthy tissue because a person decided they didn't want it, to me, is a direct violation of the Hippocratic Oath and a violation of every ethic that every doctor should have. What Steve said about it doesn't work is absolutely right. The reason we've had an explosion in these transgender clinics is because instead of telling people you've got a mental illness, and I've suffered from mental illness, there's no particular stigma attached. It just happens like anything else. You the thing that needs to be made clear to them is they have become convinced now by society that if they are a very upset and lonely and scared and disturbed young boy, they've been told that if they become a young girl, they're going to be happy. But what they are is extremely upset, sad, and disturbed young people who then, after a few months after the initial, love bomb wears off, find themselves with the same exact problems that they had, and now they can't go back. Now they really are in the twilight zone, and they can't recover from this. There is something about this that isn't just psychologically wrong. There's something about people chopping off their own arms and legs that is just plain evil. It's just morally repugnant because all of these things are gifts, and there are many, many people out there who are either born without those gifts or have been deprived of those gifts, and to simply throw them away is horrific. I have had the enormous honor of doing a number of events usually as an MC for wounded veterans. And I had the unbelievable privilege to stand next to a man who had lost both his arms and his legs in service to his country. And when I think about people doing that to themselves so that they can wear the victim hat, when the real victim did it in order to create a society that is so safe that people can be this insane in it, it's really quite disturbing. I am a big believer in a free country. I 100% believe in being able to do what you want to do with your own life. I fully believe you swing your arm as much as you want until your fist encounters somebody else's nose, and then we have to have a discussion. But when you have people who are in this kind of situation, any medical professional, either a medical doctor or a psychologist who is aiding that kind of mental illness, is somebody who I think needs to be delicensed. You're not supposed to be encouraging kleptomaniacs, and you're not supposed to be encouraging arsonists. You're not supposed to be encouraging any of those things. You're supposed to be helping these people and healing them. If this were a one-off or a two-off, I wouldn't think anything about it. I would, and I hope Scott's right. I hope this is something that's just out on the fringe and is getting reported, but that's not the impression I get. The impression I'm getting is that I'm seeing more and more of this. And ultimately, I think the things that drive this are, number one, millennials and Gen Zers have been taught from birth to hate the entire idea of humanity. Just that humanity is a cancer on the planet, we'd all be better off without humanity. They've also been taught that white people are the scourge of the earth, and the people in the cases that I've listed happen to be white, so I suppose maybe they feel like they're atoning for something. But when you have a society that is so, when you have a progressive movement that is so determined to demonize every aspect of human existence, you can expect to see more of this. And when you especially have a society where the only way to stand out is by increasing your victimhood points, you will definitely see more of this. It is exceedingly disturbing, and the thing that I think made me most interested in wanting to bring this up is the idea of having somebody blind themselves with bleach or have their legs cut off is so morally repugnant that it makes me wonder why we don't have that same kind of reaction to top surgeries, just as one example. It's an illness, and it needs to be treated as an illness, and I have enormous sympathy for these people. But the people I consider to be the villains in this story are the people who are medical professionals who should be helping them recover rather than putting them in a situation that is irrecoverable and that they will never, ever be able to get out of. And that's just beyond appalling to me. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time right here on Right Angle.